The morning mist clings to the rolling hills of Sussex, like a shroud over the dead. It is October 14th, 1066, and the fate of England hangs in the balance on a blood-soaked ridge near the town of Hastings. Two armies face each other across a field that will soon become a graveyard. On one side stands Harold Godwinson, the Saxon king who has ruled England for barely 9 months, his exhausted warriors forming a wall of shields and iron will. On the other side, Duke William of Normandy, the bastard son who would be king, commands a force unlike anything the English have ever faced, a perfectly orchestrated machine of mounted knights and disciplined infantry, trained to move as one, to strike as one, to kill as one. This is not just a battle. This is the moment when the old world dies and a new one is born in fire and steel. This is the story of how Norman cavalry and infantry coordination changed the course of history forever. To understand what happens on this fateful day, we must journey backward through time to the world that created this collision of destinies. England in 1066 is a kingdom caught between ages, a realm where ancient Saxon traditions clash with the rising tide of Norman ambition. For centuries, the Anglo-Saxons have ruled this island, their kings chosen by councils of nobles, their armies built on the strength of the furred farmers and freemen who take up axes and spears when their lords call them to war. It is a system born of tradition, of land and loyalty, of men who fight beside their neighbors to defend their homes. But across the narrow strip of water, known as the English Channel, a different kind of warrior has been forging himself in the fires of constant warfare. William of Normandy is not born to wear a crown. He is born a bastard, the son of Duke Robert I and a tanner's daughter named Herleva. In the brutal politics of 11th century France, this should have been his death sentence. When his father dies on pilgrimage to Jerusalem in 1035, young William is only 7 or 8 years old, and Normandy descends into chaos. Rival nobles see an opportunity in the vulnerable boy duke. 3 of William's guardians are murdered. Assassination attempts force him to sleep in different houses, hidden by loyal servants who risk their lives to keep him alive. He grows up surrounded by violence, by betrayal, by the constant knowledge that his life hangs by a thread. This crucible of blood and fear forges something remarkable, a leader who understands that survival demands not just courage, but cunning, not just strength, but strategy, not just warriors, but a system that turns warriors into an unstoppable force. By the time William reaches manhood, he has transformed Normandy from a fragmented collection of feuding lords into one of the most formidable military powers in Western Europe. The secret lies in something revolutionary, the Norman way of war. While other armies are loose collections of individual warriors, each man fighting for his own glory, William builds something different. He creates a military machine where cavalry and infantry are not separate forces competing for honor, but complementary parts of a single devastating weapon. His knights are not just brave horsemen charging wildly into battle. They are trained, drilled, disciplined. They practice coordinated charges, wheeling movements, feigned retreats that lure enemies into traps. And supporting them are ranks of infantry spearmen, archers, crossbowmen, who know exactly when to advance, when to hold, when to create openings for the cavalry to exploit. This system is built on the foundation of feudalism, a social structure where land and loyalty flow in carefully measured exchanges. A lord grants land to a vassal, and in return, the vassal pledges military service, not just his own sword, but equipped knights and soldiers ready to fight when called upon. It creates an army that is always ready, always training, always prepared. More importantly, it creates an army that fights as a coordinated unit rather than a mob of individuals. The Norman cavalry charges in disciplined waves, not chaotic rushes. When they retreat, it is often planned, drawing enemy forces out of formation so infantry can strike at their flanks. When they attack, archers soften enemy positions first, then infantry engage to fix the enemy in place, and finally cavalry smashes through at the critical moment. It is warfare as symphony, each instrument playing its part at precisely the right moment to create a crescendo of destruction. William needs this system because his claim to the English throne is built on sand. When Edward the Confessor, the childless Saxon king of England, dies in January 1066, the English nobles choose Harold Godwinson, the most powerful earl in the kingdom, as their new king. Harold is everything William is not English-born, beloved by his people, a proven war leader who has fought Welsh princes and Norwegian invaders. But William insists that Edward promised him the throne years earlier, that Harold himself swore an oath on holy relics to support William's claim. Whether these claims are true or convenient fabrications, William believes them with the fervor of a man who has spent his entire life fighting for everything he has. When Harold takes the crown, William sees it as theft, as betrayal, as a wrong that must be righted with sword and fire. But invading England is not simple. The English Channel is 21 miles of treacherous water that has swallowed countless ships. William needs an army, a fleet, supplies, and most of all, legitimacy. He spends months building his invasion force, calling on every vassal, every ally, every mercenary who might join his cause. He sends envoys to Pope Alexander II in Rome, arguing that Harold is a perjurer, an oathbreaker, that God himself supports William's claim. The Pope, seeing an opportunity to extend Rome's influence over the English Church, sends William a papal banner, a holy endorsement that transforms this invasion from naked aggression into a righteous crusade. Knights and adventurers from across France, Brittany, Flanders, and beyond flock to William's banner, lured by promises of English land and English gold. By summer's end, William has assembled perhaps 7,000 men cavalry, infantry, archers, and a fleet of over 600 ships built specifically for this invasion. Meanwhile, across the Channel, Harold faces a different nightmare. The spring and summer of 1066 are seasons of dread. He knows William is coming. Every day, Harold musters the Fyrd, calling farmers from their fields to stand guard along the southern coast, watching for Norman sails. Thousands of men camp along the beaches, week after week, eating through supplies, growing restless. Ships patrol the waters. The entire kingdom holds its breath, but weeks turn to months, and William does not come. The winds blow from the north, trapping the Norman fleet in port. Harold's supplies run low. His soldiers grow impatient. By early September, with harvest season upon them and no sign of invasion, Harold makes a fateful decision. He dismisses the Fyrd. He sends his ships back to London. For the first time in months, southern England is undefended. And then, as if scripted by fate's cruelest playwright, disaster strikes from an unexpected direction. Harald Hardrada, the legendary Viking king of Norway, lands in northern England with 300 ships and thousands of warriors, claiming the English throne for himself. Harold Godwinson has no choice. He gathers what forces he can and marches north at a punishing pace, covering nearly 200 miles in just 4 days. On September 25th, at Stamford Bridge near York, Harold catches the Viking army by surprise and wins a crushing victory. Hardrada dies in the battle, pierced by an arrow through the throat. It is one of the great triumphs of Harold's career, a victory that should cement his legend forever. But there is no time to celebrate. Even as Harold's men are pulling their weapons from Viking corpses, a messenger arrives with news that drains the color from the king's face. William has landed. 3 days earlier, on September 28th, while Harold was fighting in the north, Norman ships filled Pevensey Bay on England's southern coast. William's army has come ashore unopposed and is now fortifying positions near Hastings, burning villages, seizing supplies, daring Harold to come and fight. Harold faces an impossible choice. His army is exhausted from the forced march north and the brutal battle at Stamford Bridge. Many of his best warriors lie dead on northern fields. His brother Gyrth begs him to wait, to gather fresh troops, to let someone else lead the initial battle against William while Harold rebuilds his strength. But Harold refuses. He knows what William is doing. By ravaging the lands of Sussex, William is deliberately provoking Harold, challenging his honor, forcing his hand. Sussex is Harold's own earldom, his homeland. Every day Harold waits, more of his people suffer under Norman occupation. Pride, duty, and strategic calculation all point in the same direction. Harold will march south, and he will destroy this Norman invader just as he destroyed the Vikings. The English army makes another forced march, this time heading south through the heart of England. Some men are veterans of Stamford Bridge, still carrying wounds from that battle. Others are fresh troops who join the march as it passes through their regions. By the night of October 13th, Harold's army has reached the ridge at Senlac Hill, about 7 miles from William's position near Hastings. It is a strong defensive position. The ridge rises sharply from the surrounding land, making any uphill attack costly and difficult. Harold's men begin fortifying their position, creating a shield wall along the crest of the ridge. They plant stakes, they prepare defenses, they ready themselves for the storm they know is coming. That night, fires burn in both camps. English voices sing old Saxon songs. Norman priests hear confessions and bless weapons. Both sides know that tomorrow, everything will be decided. Dawn comes gray and cold on October 14th. William's army begins to move before first light, marching the 7 miles from Hastings to Senlac Hill in battle formation. This march itself demonstrates the sophistication of Norman military organization. The army moves in 3 divisions, each a complete combined arms force. On the left are Bretons and other allied forces. In the center, William commands his Norman corps. On the right are French and Flemish troops. Each division contains cavalry, infantry, and archers, organized to fight independently if needed, but capable of coordinating for maximum effect. The discipline required to move thousands of men through the pre-dawn darkness while maintaining this formation speaks to months and years of training and practice. As the sun rises, the Norman army emerges from the morning mist to see their enemy arrayed along the ridge above them. The sight must have given even veteran warriors pause. Harold's shield wall is formidable, thousands of warriors standing shoulder to shoulder, their shields overlapping to create an almost solid wall of wood and iron. In the front ranks are the housecarls, Harold's elite professional soldiers, each man armed with a long-handled Danish axe capable of splitting shields, breaking swords, and decapitating horses with a single blow. Behind them stand the fyrd, the militia levies, armed with spears, axes, and whatever weapons they could bring. The line stretches for hundreds of yards along the ridge, anchored by Harold's personal standards, the Dragon of Wessex, and his personal banner, the Fighting Man. The position is so strong that some Norman commanders urge William to wait, to starve the English out, to avoid direct assault. William refuses. Every day of delay allows Harold to gather more troops, to strengthen his position further. William's supplies are limited. His army is deep in enemy territory, with no secure line of retreat. Most critically, William understands that Harold's position, while strong defensively, has a fatal weakness. The English cannot win by standing still. They must break William's army, or eventually be worn down. And that means William controls the pace and nature of the battle. He can probe, he can test, he can force Harold to respond. William issues his orders. The attack will begin at 9 in the morning. The battle opens with the first demonstration of Norman combined arms coordination. Archers advance up the slope, moving within range of the English line. Hundreds of arrows arc into the sky, a dark cloud that falls upon the shield wall like deadly rain. But the angle is wrong. Firing uphill means many arrows strike shields rather than flying over them to hit exposed heads and bodies. The English crouch behind their shields and endure. Some men fall, but the shield wall holds. This is exactly what William expects. The archers are not meant to break the English line. They are meant to begin the process of wearing it down, of forcing the English to remain defensive, of creating the conditions for what comes next. Now comes the infantry. Norman foot soldiers, armed with spears and swords, begin climbing the slope toward the shield wall. This is brutal, exhausting work. They are moving uphill, carrying weapons and shields, knowing that death waits at the summit. As they near the English line, the defenders spring to life. Spears thrust forward, axes rise and fall. Stones and javelins rain down from the English position. The Norman infantry crashes into the shield wall like waves against a cliff, and like waves, they break and fall back. Bodies tumble down the slope. Wounded men crawl or are dragged back by comrades. The shield wall, battered but unbroken, closes ranks over its own dead and waits for the next assault. This is the moment that defines the battle, the moment when Norman cavalry and infantry coordination transforms from theory into devastating practice. As the Norman infantry falls back down the slope, they do not retreat in disorder. They move to the sides, clearing a path up the center. And into this path thunder the mounted knights, the heavy cavalry that is the pride of Norman warfare. These are not wild barbarians charging in a mob. These are trained warriors riding in formation, their lances leveled, their charge timed to hit the English line precisely when it is most vulnerable, immediately after repelling the infantry assault. When warriors are tired, when gaps have opened in the shield wall, when attention is focused downward on the foot soldiers. The impact of armored cavalry hitting a shield wall is a sound and sensation impossible to fully describe. The ground shakes, shields splinter. Men are knocked backward or trampled. Lances punch through armor. Horses rear and kick, their hooves as deadly as any weapon. For a moment, it seems the shield wall might break. But Harold's housecarls are not ordinary soldiers. These are men who have trained their entire adult lives for exactly this kind of warfare. The Danish axes they wield are specifically designed to fight cavalry. A skilled housecarl can swing his axe in a wide arc that decapitates a horse or takes off a rider's leg at the thigh. All along the line, Norman knights who penetrate the shield wall find themselves surrounded, pulled from their saddles, hacked to pieces by warriors who know that giving ground means death for everyone behind them. The cavalry charge stalls. Horses refuse to push forward into the wall of axes and spears. Some riders are killed. Others retreat back down the slope to regroup. Once again, the shield wall has held. But this is not a failure of Norman coordination. It is exactly what William planned. Each assault, whether by archers, infantry, or cavalry, weakens the English line incrementally. Men tire, shields break. Gaps appear and are closed. The English cannot rotate fresh troops to the front easily because their entire force is committed to holding the ridge. The Normans, by contrast, can pull back their forces to rest, to reorganize, to prepare the next phase of attack. William is not trying to break through in one dramatic charge. He is conducting a siege against a shield wall, wearing it down piece by piece, looking for the moment when exhaustion and casualties create a fatal weakness. For hours, this pattern repeats. Arrows fall. Infantry climbs the slope and crashes into the shield wall. Cavalry charges into gaps and is driven back. The slope becomes slick with blood. Bodies pile up at the base of the ridge, English and Norman intermingled in death. The noise is overwhelming, the clash of metal on metal, the screams of wounded men and dying horses, the shouting of commanders trying to make themselves heard over the chaos. The sun climbs higher in the sky. Both armies are locked in a brutal stalemate, neither able to break the other, both bleeding themselves toward exhaustion. And then, sometime around midday, something happens that changes everything. On the Norman left flank, the Breton division launches another assault up the slope. Once again, they are driven back by the fierce English defense. But this time, as the Bretons retreat down the hill, something unusual occurs. A portion of the English right flank breaks formation and pursues them. These are likely furred troops, not the disciplined housecarls, men whose blood is up after hours of defensive fighting, who see a chance to finally strike back at their tormentors. They pour down the slope after the retreating Bretons, abandoning the shield wall, leaving a gaping hole in Harold's defensive line. William sees this immediately. In a battle this chaotic, with thousands of men fighting across a wide front, a commander's ability to recognize and exploit fleeting opportunities separates genius from competence. William instantly understands what has happened and what it means. He wheels his cavalry around and sends them crashing into the pursuing English from the flank. Cut off from their main line, without the protection of the shield wall, these English troops are slaughtered. The Norman cavalry rides them down, killing many, scattering the rest. It is a massacre, and more importantly, it is a lesson. William realizes he has discovered the key to breaking Harold's fortress. The English strength is their disciplined defense, but discipline requires leadership and control. If parts of the English army can be lured out of position, isolated, and destroyed, the entire line will eventually collapse. William issues new orders to his commanders. They will execute feigned retreats, fake withdrawals, designed to look like genuine defeats that will lure English troops out of formation. It is a sophisticated tactic that requires incredible discipline. Cavalry must charge forward convincingly, engage the enemy, then retreat in a controlled manner that looks panicked but maintains cohesion. Infantry must fall back without actually breaking. The timing must be perfect retreat too soon, and the English won't pursue. Retreat too slowly, and the retreat becomes real. Most critically, fresh cavalry units must be positioned to swing around and catch pursuing English forces before they can retreat to the safety of the shield wall. Over the next several hours, this tactic is employed again and again. Norman forces attack, engage, then retreat. Each time, some portion of the English line, drunk on the possibility of victory, charges down the slope after them. Each time, Norman cavalry sweeps in from the flanks and cuts them down. It is warfare as art. Each feigned retreat, a carefully choreographed performance designed to trade Norman patience for English lives. The discipline required is extraordinary. Norman soldiers must suppress every instinct to actually flee, must trust their commanders to spring the trap at exactly the right moment, must maintain formation even when English axes are splitting shields beside them. The English pay a terrible price for these pursuits. Harold's army is bleeding strength from 1,000 cuts. The shield wall grows thinner, shorter, weaker. Exhaustion sets in. Men who have been standing and fighting for 6 or 7 hours without food or rest begin to slow, to make mistakes, to fall. The afternoon sun begins its descent toward evening, and still the battle rages. William commits everything now. The archers change tactics, firing high into the air so arrows fall almost vertically onto the English position, making shields less effective. Infantry and cavalry coordinate their assaults more closely, with infantry pinning English troops in place while cavalry strikes from multiple angles simultaneously. And then, as the day draws toward evening, comes the moment that will echo through history. The exact sequence of events becomes confused in the chaos and horror of battle, different chroniclers recording different details, but the outcome is brutally clear. At some point during the late afternoon assault, an arrow arcs high into the sky above the English center, where Harold fights beneath his banners. The arrow falls and strikes Harold in the face. Some accounts say it pierced his eye. Others say it struck his face or forehead. What matters is that England's king is wounded, perhaps mortally, at the worst possible moment. Confusion ripples through the English line. Is Harold dead? Is he wounded? Where are his brothers? Command and control, already strained by hours of combat, begins to break down. Norman cavalry, sensing weakness, redoubles its attacks against the English center. A group of knights crashes through the wavering shield wall and reaches Harold's position. What happens next is obscured by the fog of war and centuries of conflicting accounts. But when those knights retreat, Harold Godwinson lies dead, hacked to pieces, his body so mutilated that it can only be identified by marks known to his wife. With their king dead, English resistance collapses. The shield wall that has held for 8 or 9 hours finally breaks. Some English troops fight on, gathering around Harold's brothers Gurth and Leofwine, only to see both men fall in the final fighting. Others flee into the gathering darkness, pursued by Norman cavalry, who cut them down as they run. Some English warriors make a final stand at a ravine behind the ridge, ambushing and killing Norman knights who pursue too carelessly in the dusk. But these are the death throes of a lost cause. By nightfall, the Battle of Hastings is over. The English army is destroyed. Harold and his brothers are dead, and William of Normandy stands victorious on a field of corpses. The brilliance of Norman combined arms coordination had achieved what seemed impossible at dawn, the destruction of a larger army holding a superior defensive position. Every phase of William's battle plan had worked in harmony. Archers had weakened and distracted the English. Infantry had engaged them, pinned them in position, worn them down. Cavalry had exploited every weakness, every gap, every moment when English discipline faltered. The feigned retreats had turned English aggression against itself, using the defender's own strength as a weapon. Most importantly, the ability of infantry and cavalry to coordinate their movements, to support each other, to function as a single instrument of war rather than competing forces, had proven decisive. The aftermath of Hastings is swift and merciless. William marches on London, crushing what little resistance remains. On Christmas Day, 1066, in Westminster Abbey, William the Bastard is crowned William the Conqueror, King of England. The Norman invasion does not end with Harold's death. It has only begun. Over the following years, William and his followers will reshape English society from top to bottom. The Anglo-Saxon nobility is almost entirely destroyed, killed in battle, or dispossessed of their lands. Norman lords take their place, bringing with them the feudal system, castle-building technology, and military organization that had won at Hastings. The English language absorbs thousands of French words. The English church is reformed along Norman lines. Ancient laws and customs are replaced or modified. An entire culture is, if not destroyed, then fundamentally transformed. The military lessons of Hastings reverberate through the centuries. The battle proves definitively that cavalry and infantry fighting in coordinated combination are far more effective than either fighting alone. This principle becomes central to European warfare for the next 300 years, until the longbow and pike formations of later centuries force another evolution. The idea of combined arms coordinating different military capabilities to multiply their effectiveness remains fundamental to modern military doctrine even today. When modern armies coordinate infantry, armor, artillery, and air power, they are applying the same principles William's army demonstrated on that October morning in